Pursuant to Section 15H, Rule 4 of the Rules of the House, the Speaker, after consulting the Deputy Speakers, has designated the Honorable Victoria Isabel Noel to preside in today's session.
The session is now called to order. Everybody is requested to rise for the singing of the national anthem.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, buyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupit, di ka masisingil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bakaw, may nilang ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kisap ng wataw at mo'y tagumpay na nagdidinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang may magdidilim, lupa ng araw ng warangit pagsita, kulay langit sa piling mo, aming ligaya dapat may mamapit, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please remain standing for a few minutes of silent prayer and meditation. Session is suspended for a few minutes.
Session resumed. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we defer the calling of the roll.
Any objection? There being no objection, the calling of the roll is deferred.
Madam Speaker, I move that we defer the approval of the journal.
Any objection? There being no objection, the reading of the journal is deferred.
Madam Speaker, I move that we now proceed with the reference of business and request that the Secretary General be directed to read the titles of the bills, resolutions on first reading, as well as communications and committee reports. So moved, Madam Speaker.
Any objection? The Secretary General is so directed.
Reference of business resolutions, House Resolution 2183, calling for a House inquiry into the unlawful recruitment of minors and underage workers as of overseas domestic workers. Representative Bertiz.
To the Committee on Rules.
House Resolution 2184, urging the DSWD and the LBP to immediately ensure that qualified beneficiaries of various social welfare and benefits program under RA 10963 or the Train Law are provided with ATM cards for their personal comfort and convenience. Representative Sandoval.
To the Committee on Social Services.
Communication, report of Honorable Dante Maling, Acting Secretary General of the House, on enrolled bill, House Bill 990, submitted to the Office of the President for His Excellency's consideration, signature pursuant to provision of Rule 6, Section 18, Paragraph H of the Rules of the House.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, under the calendar of business for the day, I move that we consider House Bill number 8169 as submitted by the Committee on Appropriations. And for this purpose, may I ask that the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill. So moved, Madam Speaker.
Any objections? Secretary General is so directed.
House Bill 8169, an act appropriating funds for the operation of the Government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2019, and for other purposes.
Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that the representative Maricar Zamora of the 1st District of Compostela Valley be recognized to sponsor the measure. So moved.
Congresswoman Zamora is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, honorable members of this House, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. At the outset, we would like to express our sincerest gratitude to the House leadership for the trust and confidence which enable us to speak before you in this capacity today. Rest assured that while we are overwhelmed, knowing full well the import and magnitude of the task at hand, we will exercise our best efforts to rise to the challenge. We appeal to the honorable body to generously and helpfully extend much-needed assistance as we discharge our constitutional mandate. Let us work hand in hand in enacting a budget that will build a bright future for the country and its people. Today, we submit the General Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2019 and encourage everyone to exercise our constitutional duty of dissecting and scrutinizing the most important piece of legislation, the people's budget. The General Appropriations Bill is a legislative measure so crucial that no other matter is considered more in detail other than how the income and revenues collected must be returned to the people through the national budget. This is the core and spirit of appropriations, how the revenues and taxes collected are returned to the people, to our constituents, in order to genuinely and efficiently respond to their needs, to uplift them and grant all of us a position of dignity in this society. May I reiterate the statement of the Majority Leader yesterday that the taxes are paid in cash but must be reimbursed in kind, and the budget is the thick checkbook of how and in what forms the refunds will be made. As representatives of the people, we are accountable for every peso footed and ruled in the budget book, and we invite our esteemed colleagues to subject them to your scrutiny. Madam Speaker, the fiscal year 2019 General Appropriations Bill was formulated on the basis of the budget of expenditures and sources of financing submitted by the President to Congress on July 23, 2018, in consonance with Section 22, Article 7 of the Constitution. The President's budget was the basis of discussions in the committee briefings and then used further in fashioning this General Appropriations Bill. Having been thus put to use, the President's budget has fulfilled its constitutional purpose, and now in turn, we in the House have the duty to exercise our discretion in the legislative power of the purse. Madam Speaker, the proposed budget is a crucial step in our continuing pursuit of good governance. In crafting the 2019 President's budget, the government has adopted a revolutionary shift from the current obligation-based budgeting system to an annual cash-based budgeting system. The 3.757 trillion budget is the first annual cash-based budget of the Philippine government, anchored on the theme, Building a Bright Future for the Philippines and its People. Under an annual cash-based appropriations, all government programs and projects for the fiscal year should be implemented and delivered within the same fiscal year. Goods and services delivered, inspected, and accepted until the end of the fiscal year will be settled within the same year, up to the initial 3 months following the end of the fiscal year or the extended payment period. Prior to the fiscal year 2019 budget, every national budget prepared and submitted to Congress each year was an obligation-based budget. Under this system, the performance of the agencies is based on their ability to enter into obligations to implement and pay contracts on goods and services. Implementation can extend beyond 2 years and with no time limit for payment as long as there is an existing contract. As a consequence, the government must provide funds to pay the supplier upon acceptance of the deliveries, even beyond the validity of the appropriation. Why shift to annual cash-based budgeting? First, it promotes discipline among agencies because only the programs and projects which are shovel-ready or those ready for implementation are included in the budget. Hence, it requires better planning, early procurement, and greater coordination among agencies. Second, it raises the credibility of the government with its suppliers and contractors by ensuring that the payment of contractual obligations which are scheduled to be delivered in the fiscal year are reflected in the budget, and that the payments of those deliverables accepted are settled within the year up to the extended payment period. Third, it supports the government's expansionary policy of addressing underspending, enabling it to double expenditures for infrastructure services and expand social services, and supports the government's growth target of 7.8% during the period. Fourth, it modernizes the budgeting system and raises it to international standards. Madam Speaker, while the budget reform bill remains pending congressional action, the government has gone forward with a cash-based budgeting system. In this light, we share the apprehensions of our colleagues on the implementation of the system, but we will take this boldness as a step forward towards true and unprecedented change. In fact, we reconciled these apprehensions through initial discussions with the Department of Budget and Management of a hybrid spending program. At the proper time, the compromise on this hybrid budget system shall be resolved. The fiscal year 2019 expenditure program. With that as a background, may I now present the expenditure program for fiscal year 2019, Madam Speaker. The 3.757 trillion cash-based budget is equivalent to 19.3% of GDP, which is marginally higher compared to 18.9% in 2018. This is about 433 billion, or 13% higher than the 2018 cash-based equivalent of 3.324 trillion. Madam Speaker, for the sake of comparison, the 2019 cash-based appropriations of 3.757 trillion appears lower by 10 billion than the 2018 obligation-based budget of 3.767 trillion. Although the cash-based budget may not directly comparable with the obligation-based budget, the difference of only 10 billion indicates that the national government intends to spend more, given the shorter period of 1 year for agencies to implement and settle the payments with the suppliers and contractors. Madam Speaker, in terms of appropriation source, the 2019 budget is supported by general appropriations of 2,882.6 billion pesos, accounting for 72.9% of the total budget. The automatic appropriations of 1,071.6 billion pesos, or 27.1% of the total budget. House Bill number 8169 seeks to authorize for fiscal year 2019 a total new general appropriations of 2,882.6 billion, consisting of programmed new appropriations of 2,685.5 billion and unprogrammed new general appropriations of 197.1 billion, which can be spent only if when actual revenue collections for the year exceeds the target revenue, per budget of expenditures and sources of financing, or when new foreign loans or grants are received. The proposed automatic appropriations of 1,071.6 billion is outside the purview of House Bill number 8169 because these funds do not require action by Congress and need not be included in the legislation of the budget, as these are programmed annually by virtue of their enabling laws. Madam Speaker, may I now present to you the sectoral allocation of the 3.757 trillion budget, subject to the amendments adopted per committee report number 854. The social services sector will get the largest allocation of 1.377 trillion, or 36.7% of the total 2019 budget, investing on human infrastructure through education, culture, and manpower development by implementing key programs and projects aimed at protecting the vulnerable and providing expanded educational opportunities. These include the Department of Education's 43.7 billion basic education facilities, the 32.1 billion government assistance to students in private schools and non-DepEd public schools, among others. Other big-ticket programs under the social services sectors are 51 billion allocated to universal access to quality tertiary education of the Commission on Higher Education and the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. National Health Insurance Program of 67 billion, purchase of drugs and medicines of 15.2 billion, Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program or 4Ps of 88.1 billion, and benefits of senior citizens of 23.2 billion. The economic services sector will receive the second largest share at 28.4% with a 1,068.4 billion allocation. Among the key programs to be funded under the economic services are the 4 Clark City Build projects. The general public services sector will receive the third largest allocation with 709.4 billion or 18.9%, mainly for building a more secure and peaceful nation by ensuring the internal security of the country and maintaining public order. Among the programs to be implemented with this allocation are the Philippine National Police Capability Enhancement Program, the Department of Justice Investigation, Witness Protection and Prosecution Services, the Supreme Court's allocation for the independent, efficient, and effective administration of justice, and the construction of halls of justice. The defense sector will receive the lowest allocation of 188.2 billion or 5% of the budget. It includes the provision of 25.0 billion to continuously support the revised AFP modernization program of the Department of National Defense, particularly the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Debt burden or interest payments and net lending to be disbursed to creditors is allotted 414.1 billion or 11% of the total budget. Madam Speaker, in terms of expense class, MOOE, or Maintenance and Other Operating Expenses, will receive the biggest share of the 2019 budget with 1,394.9 billion, representing 37.1%, followed by Personnel Services with 1,185 billion, or 31.1%, Capital Outlays with 776.1 billion, or 20.7%, and financial expenses with 401 billion or 10.7%. Among the expenses under MOE will cover the implementation of banner programs of social protection, such as Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program of the DSWD of 88.1 billion, the National Health Insurance Program of the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation of 67.4 billion, and the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education of the CHED and TESDA of 51 billion. The major expenses under Personnel Services will support the final tranche of the salary hike of government employees, about 58.1 billion, the salary adjustments of military and uniformed personnel of about 70 billion, and the pension adjustments of military and uniformed personnel of 40.4 billion, and the creation of new positions for teachers, police, and jail officers. The spending of capital outlay will fund the flagship infrastructure projects under the government's Build, Build, Build program, such as roads, rails, ports, airports, and other transport networks, schools and hospitals, and telecommunication infrastructure. The allocation for financial expenses will be used for the payment of debt service interest expense of 399.6 billion or other bank charges. Madam Speaker, the departments with the highest budgetary allocation will be receiving the following. The top recipient, consistent with the constitutional mandate, is the Department of Education, including the state universities and colleges, Commission on Higher Education, and the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, amounting to 659.3 billion. Second, the Department of Public Works and Highways, amounting to 555.7 billion. Third, Department of Interior and Local Government, amounting to 225.6 billion. Fourth, Department of National Defense, amounting to 183.4 billion. Fifth, Department of Social Welfare and Development, amounting to 173.3 billion. Sixth, Department of Health, amounting to 141.4 billion. Seventh, Department of Transportation, amounting to 76.1 billion. Eighth, Department of Agriculture, amounting to 49.8 billion. The Judiciary on the ninth place, amounting to 37.3 billion. 10th, Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, amounting to 32.3 billion. Madam Speaker, let me provide a rundown of the major programs and projects to be implemented in 2019. On infrastructure program, the infrastructure budget of 2019 of 909.7 billion will fund the Build, Build, Build program of the government that will usher the golden age of infrastructure. Among the major infrastructure projects include improving growth corridors in Mindanao Road Sector Project amounting to 3.57 billion, road upgrading and preservation project amounting to 2.34 billion, Central Luzon Link Expressway amounting to 1.85 billion, Davao City Bypass Construction Project amounting to 1.67 billion, Arterial Road Bypass Construction Project Phase 3 amounting to 1.19 billion. Major flood control projects has some of the examples of these projects. Flood Risk Management Project for Cagayan de Oro River amounting to 2.75 billion, Ambal Simoay River and Rio Grande de Mindanao River Flood Control Projects amounting to 2.63 billion, Metro Manila Flood Management Projects Phase 1 amounting to 2.20 billion, Integrated Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Change Adaptation amounting to 1.84 billion, Flood Risk Management Project in Cagayan, Tagoloan, and Imus Rivers amounting to 1.68 billion. Major rail transport projects include the following: PNR North, Phase 1, Subsidy for Mass Transport, MRT 3, Mindanao Railway Project Phase 1, Metro Manila Subway Project Phase 1, PNR South Commuter, formerly North-South Railway Project Phase 2. On major social projects, inequity reducing transformation or pagbabago, expanding economic opportunities in agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and industry services. The Department of Agriculture and National Irrigation Administration makes up the bulk of the total support for agriculture development at 49.8 billion and 36.9 billion respectively. Some of the major projects provides for the construction of 996 kilometers of farm-to-market roads at 11.4 billion. Likewise, credit support services under the Agricultural Credit Policy Council is allotted with 3.4 billion to be extended to target beneficiaries under the program. To ensure education for all, basic education will receive 531.5 billion for the continuous implementation of the K-12 program, 120.1 billion to cover the provisions of free tertiary education, and 14.8 billion to implement technical vocational education. With the availability of funds for health and nutrition, some 74.1 billion will be spent to ensure that health services will reach the poorest of the poor. Another 67.4 billion will cover the health insurance premiums of 20.8 million beneficiaries, including 5.4 million senior citizens. Labor and Employment Services is allocated the amount of 13.4 billion for the special program for employment of students. Jumpstart Philippines program, tulong panghanapbuhay sa ating disadvantaged or displaced workers and government internship program, among others. Protecting the poor and the marginalized remains to be the top priority of the President, which aims to cut the poverty incidence rate from 21.6% in 2015 to 14% by 2022. A total of 136.8 billion is set aside for the DSWD to cover the implementation of social protection programs. Among the major programs are the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program, the Social Pension for Indigent Senior Citizen, Kapit Bisig Laban sa Kahirapan or Kalahi Seeds National Community-Driven Development Project, and Sustainable Livelihood Program. The government will focus on expanding decent housing and healthy environment to provide the people with secure and affordable homes. With the funding support of major housing projects such as resettlement program for informal settlers family residing in danger areas in Metro Manila, the allocation of the disadvantaged sector in the amount of 1.7 billion will basically cover resettlement requirements in 2019. The national electrification is allotted the amount of 1.2 billion to cover the funding requirement for the electrification of 775 sitios or rural areas nationwide. Immediate action is needed to safeguard the ecosystems and natural resources from the degrading and worsening effects of urbanization and climate change. In line with this, 25.1 billion will be given to the DNR for forest protection, pollution reduction, and coastal marine conservation. As highlighted by the President during his third SONA, he underscored his commitment to restore environmental integrity and livelihood in Boracay, following closure to tourists in early 2018. To maintain Boracay as a world-class tourist destination, some 150 million is allotted to rehabilitate the island. To instill a culture of peace and the government continues to enforce development interventions for areas prone to and affected by armed conflict through the Payapa at Masaganang Pamayanan or Pamana program. For this purpose, the program is allocated the amount of 386 million. The promotion of peace and security in Mindanao will also continue to be a priority of the government. Hence, the amount of 32.3 billion is allocated to the ARM to fund various development programs and projects in the regions. In pursuit of the government's target to significantly reduce criminality and ensure the safety and security of all Filipinos, the amount of 225.6 billion is provided to the DILG to intensify efforts in promoting peace and order. To strengthen national defense and protect the country from external threats, the government is providing the amount of 183.4 billion for the Department of National Defense, for which about 129.6 billion is intended for territorial defense, security, and stability services. Madam Speaker, to finance the expenditure plan for 2019, the national government will raise 3.208 trillion in revenues. Of the 3.208 trillion revenues, 3.18 trillion or 94.1% will be in the form of taxes. The Bureau of Internal Revenue will generate the bulk of this amount with 2.331 trillion, while the rest will be contributed by the Bureau of Customs with 662.2 billion and other offices with 25.0 billion. The balance of 5.9% will come from non-tax revenues amounting to 188.3 billion, while 2 billion is expected from the sale of government assets. On the other hand, the government intends to borrow in 2019 the amount of about 1.189 trillion, of which 282.7 billion will be sourced from foreign creditors, while 906.2 billion or 76% will be sourced domestically. Of the total borrowings, 624.4 billion will be used to finance the deficit, settle 146.3 billion in maturing debt obligations, and the balance includes contributions to the bond sinking fund and maintains sufficient cushion of cash in the Treasury. Madam Speaker, may I respectfully request the honorable members of the House of Representatives for their support in the early passage of the 2019 General Appropriations Bill. Daghang salamat.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, there being no other member who wishes to sponsor the measure, I move that we terminate the period of sponsorship. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection? Motion is carried. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, may I be recognized for a short manifestation?
The Majority Floor Leader is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are at present in the process of deliberating a very important national measure. And because we wanted to ventilate each other's ideas or reactions or anything against the bill or for the bill, we expect everybody to participate by way of interpellation or reactions to this. However, Mr. Speaker, time is so essential because this is a national budget. We would like to make representation, Mr. Speaker, on the very nature of interpellation itself. Interpellation, in its nature, is about series of questions. Questions that would elicit ideas or reactions in order that we can get the best from this measure. We will allow short laying down of premises. This is something also important. But let us keep on the very nature of interpellation itself. And so, if we agree by that suggestion, we can probably maximize our time. Number two, Mr. Speaker, we all know that in these proceedings, we utilize the English language as well as our national language. But some of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, who are not adept in our national language, find it quite hard to follow the discussion on the floor simply because they could not fathom some of the terminologies uttered in Tagalog. And so we will suggest, Mr. Speaker, although this is only a recommendation, if we can conduct the proceedings mostly in the English language, I think everybody else can participate. And on the technical side, Mr. Speaker, I also got some of the reactions from our technical people, the transcribers, who rely mostly on audio material that they can get. There is no shorthand for Tagalog, Mr. Speaker. That is why sometimes when I ask them for an actual transcription, they will give me in 3 days' time or even 1 week, because they had a hard time in translating it. Mr. Speaker, final point. If I may utilize a very good example on how interpellation is being conducted in these proceedings and in this hall, I will probably utilize the ways the Honorable Edsel Lagman is undertaking an interpellation. This is not because he is hearing it, Mr. Speaker, but I can testify, and he has been a colleague since the 13th Congress, and I have watched him from the distance, how he conducts his interpellation. Short, but substantial. Mr. Speaker, that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. I hope that everybody listened to the manifestation of the Senior Deputy Majority Floor Leader, and that all interpellations should be germane to the issue. Thank you. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, before we proceed with the interpellation and consideration of the general principles, may we recognize the officials who are here to help defend the budget, the general principles of the budget, Mr. Speaker, namely the DBM Secretary Benjamin Jokno, NEDA Secretary Ernesto Pernia, the DBM USEC Laura Pascua, NEDA USEC Rosemary Edilion, DOF USEC Hill Beltran, and Carl Kendrick Chua. The BIR Commissioner, Executive Director, NTRC Executive Director Trinidad Rodriguez, and the other assistant secretaries and directors of the various agencies who are here.
Will those executive mentioned earlier please stand to be recognized? That is Secretary Jokno, Secretary Pernia, Carl Chua, the favorite boy in Congress. Who else? Thank you. You may sit down. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that we proceed to the period of interpellation and begin consideration of the general principles and provisions of House Bill 8169. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
There is a motion to proceed with the period of interpellation on House Bill on the general principle. Is there any objection? There being none, motion is carried. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the gentleman from the 2nd District of Albay, the Representative Joey Sauceda, to sponsor and answer questions, if any, on the general principles of HB 8169. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Albay, Honorable Joey Salceda, you are very much recognized.
Ready to answer questions, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, as the first member to interpellate, I move that we acknowledge the Honorable Minority Floor Leader, Mr. Danilo Suarez.
Minority Floor Leader, please proceed.
Thank you, Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we note that the proposed 2019 budget is the transition mark from the obligation-based budget system to the annual cost-based appropriation. The rationale given is that the new system will promote better designed, better coordinated projects and programs and speed up the delivery of goods and services to the people. I respectfully inquire, Mr. Speaker, what studies or comparative data can you provide us to support your assumption that this transition would lead to a better delivery of basic services?
For one, Your Honor, the cash-based budgeting is already being used by 75 countries. Many of them are neighbors. So, Your Honor, it is a trend in modern governance to really use cash-based budgeting. But may I ask for 1 minute suspension so I can ask for empirical evidence with respect, because we haven't tried it and therefore there is no local equivalent, Your Honor. But all I can say is that there are 75 nation states that are now using the cash-based budget. 1 minute suspension, Your Honor. Your Honor.
Yes, proceed.
Actually, Your Honor, the basis for the policy, the shift in policy, comes from the OECD, and there I have on my hand, Your Honor, a short version. The use of cash appropriations in large majority of countries, including some of those that are in the are using accrual budgeting to measure the impact of current and new public policies, suggests that governments are wary of the volatility and discretion in accrual valuations when it comes to control over resources spent by ministries and departments. Your Honor, it merely suggests that why did the OECD, most countries, shift to cash-based budgeting? Because essentially, Your Honor, obligations provide too much discretion to department, while the time-bound and targeted dimensions that are being posed by cash-based budget forces them to essentially be more transparent and therefore be more effective, especially in the way they plan their operations to achieve their mandates as well as to contribute to the national goals.
Hello, Pao. Nagpipresent ako.
I still would like to have some more clarificatory
Yes, Your Honor.
But how will the change in system promote better cash management in the Treasury? Distinguished sponsor, it seems that we are following the pattern of the U.S. government system of pay-as-you-pass. Is it correct?
That's right, Your Honor.
So in pay-as-you-pass, you cannot touch any obligation from other agency because unlike in our system, we reappropriate and substantially cover up for those expenditures, not like in America. But here, in the pattern that's being presented by the administration is para hong hilaw na pay-as-you-pass. I hope you can digest the concern of the minority on this. We are going to change a system of the previous system, as you are all aware, very much educated about this obligatory system of putting money on certain programs and projects. And the proposal of the good secretary is they'll be given a length time, and if it's not going to be spent, then they will have the option to gather all of this cash. Is that correct?
That's right.
Do you believe that this is a better system?
Your Honor, kasi in-approve naman po natin dito yung BRA, Budget Reform Act, unanimously by this House.
Well, you approve it. We did not. We are against it.
I will not debate that, Your Honor. Pero ang sinasabi lang po dito na dapat mas maingat po ang mga departamento, galingan ang kanilang pagplano para po yung kanilang gustong gastusin ay yun lang may lagay nila sa budget. Kasi kung hindi, mawawala po yung authorization. O kung meron man, idadaan muli po sa proseso ng budget cycle kung sakali po talaga ito ay nagsisilbi ng isang national goal o kailangan po para masunod nila yung kanilang mandato base po sa mga binigay natin bilang kongreso doon po sa departamento nito. Sa mga tweet, Your Honor, mukhang mas magaling na tayo po lumipat ng cash-based budgeting ay dahil po mas malaki ang disiplina, lalong-lalo sa mga department, nagalingan po nila ang pagplano. Hindi yung basta na lang na makita, kahit po mayroong right-of-way, ipagdarasal na nila na maayos halimbawa yung right-of-way. Samantalang, so kailangan ayusin mo nila yung right-of-way o may nilaan tayo dito sa budget na to ng pondo para po ayusin lahat muna ang mga right-of-way bago po fundingan yung mismong proyekto, Your Honor. So mukhang mas maganda naman po yung ganong klaseng pagbabudget.
I think the system is that when you negotiate for the right-of-way, you pay.
That's right, Your Honor. So
They
we
will
have...
not allow you that it will be or promise me that say that, okay, this project will be implemented, then once the program starts to roll, then the landowners will be given due compensation.
Tama po.
If that's the approach, then mas matagal yun kasi you have
Hindi naman po. Kasi mangyayari naman po, kaysa mabitin po na kasama sa proyekto mismo yung paglalaan o i-embed mo dun sa proyekto yung right-of-way, ang ginagawa po ngayon, mas mainam na mag-set aside ka po ng pondo para sa right-of-way. Pag yung right-of-way po nakamit na, then pwede natin pong fundingan kung kaya po ng isang taon, ng isang departamento, o kung hindi kaya, doon po magbabase tayo sa bibigay na budget within the cost-based budgeting po.
But we're not going to diverse the practice that when a project is specifically mentioned in a certain area, pakikita natin that the money is available. Nandun pa rin ho yun, ano?
I think, Your Honor, if what is the scenario, Your Honor?
No, let's say that you will have a farm-to-market road to be constructed
Yes, Your Honor.
in the amount of, let's say, 100 million. DBM will say that there is amount appropriated for that.
Correct.
And that amount will be in the district.
That's right.
So, may comfort level yung mga gustong sumali that this project is fully funded and I'm covered that if I finish my work, I get paid.
That's right.
Okay. So, Let's leave it that way. The government's credibility, distinguished sponsor, with the private sector was also cited as one of the bases for the transition to a cost-based budgeting system. Distinguished sponsor, is it reasonable to conclude that contractors who deal in public works were surveyed on their experience with the previous appropriation-based budgeting system?
I think, Your Honor, then I think they just have to adapt to what is a very good and modern practice that is used by a huge majority of countries already, Your Honor. So when you talk about credibility, I think they have to assess their own capacity to implement a certain project that is available, Your Honor. And therefore, during the procurement process, Your Honor, then they know exactly what they see is what they get. And if they cannot give, then definitely, Your Honor, they lose.
Distinguished sponsor, do you believe in the equitable disposition of government funds
Yes, Your Honor.
to go to the basic local government,
Yes, Your Honor.
town,
Yes, Your Honor.
municipality, etc.? Well, if you're not going to debate me on that issue, my question is this. A sizable amount of money is not being spent for those reasons that you have stated earlier. But track record will explain itself and proven, no debate, that local government is faster in disbursing funds to their respective programs. For instance, FMR. Now, if we are going to make sure that there will be no much left over, meaning money will be spent for the 2019 budget to where it should be spent, will you have any objection if we relegate some of these funds to the local government unit?
I think, Your Honor, it's well within the DA as well as the DPWH to enter into memorandum of agreement, Your Honor, with respect to the implementation of these projects, Your Honor.
That's not usually being practiced. Maybe when the time of the DPWH, the OTR's budget will be discussed, I'll prove to you that it's not being practiced. My point here, distinguished sponsor, is on 3 separate budget deliberations, the good Secretary Jokno committed to us on that we don't have to amend the Government Procurement Act, and it will be just mere change in the IRR. Can you inquire from the good Secretary whether we can, is this in the pipeline?
Without amending any of the procurement laws or regulations, Your Honor, any department can enter into a memorandum of agreement for the implementation of projects of that department.
Ang trust ng ating measure, distinguished sponsor, is this. Money from the national government appropriated to do projects in respective provinces and districts. And our appeal is this. Number 1, promote and increase the growth of our constructor.
Correct.
Number 2, the downstream industry, meaning hardware store and other related services in that area will be benefited if that money will be done and accordingly to local contractor in certain parameter of amount that they can handle. So we don't have any debate on that. Can we make sure that when we presented the final version of the GAA, it will be clearly inserted there that priority will be given to local contractors in respective area, province, and district-wide?
Your Honor, we will consider that, Your Honor. I will not make that promise upon period of amendments, but rather, Your Honor, first I will secure, Your Honor, a ruling from the Philippine Competition Policy, which is a creation of this Congress, whether that insertion, Your Honor, would be competitive or anti-competitive, Your Honor. I think that is the only criterion probably I will. So right after this, Your Honor, I will text I will inquire with the Philippine Competition Policy whether that particular insertion or special provision will be anti-competitive or competitive, Your Honor. I think that is my only worry, Your Honor.
Distinguished sponsor, there are but very few members in this House where I salute on your economic prowess. So please bear with us on our thinking.
Yes.
That this will, if this measure can be fully implemented, there will be a very active participation of locals. It's counter-inflationary. Better enhancement of employment and money will circulate in those respective areas.
I agree, Your Honor.
Okay. Distinguished sponsor, in the President's budget message, it was stated that an efficient and successful collection of projected revenues is vital to support and implement our cost-based budget. This will ensure that the programs and projects covered by the budget are adequately funded. It adds that the national government must raise 3.21 trillion in revenues to finance the projected 3.83. As I think the sponsor of the 2019 budget have clearly illustrated, but for my learning curve, how do you suppose to collect this amount, distinguished sponsor?
Well, actually, Your Honor, in terms of revenue collection, we are ahead. And in fact, Your Honor, it is one of the singular achievement of this administration that we have already reached the peak that was posted during the Ramos administration in 1997, Your Honor. So, for example, Your Honor, our revenues in the first half of this year is actually ahead by 106 billion, Your Honor. So showing not only the effects of train, because the train is already imputed in the program. So we collected 1.4 billion, trillion, Your Honor, but our program for the first half was 1.3 trillion, Your Honor. So resulting in a positive variance of 105.7 billion. So, Your Honor, I think essentially what they're doing is, of course, I think we have very good people at BIR as well as in Customs, Your Honor.
I don't know whether my data here is correct, distinguished sponsor. They're expected to collect 2.33 trillion, is that correct?
Full year, Your Honor.
Which represents 77.2.
That's right, Your Honor.
And how much will be the participation of the Bureau of Customs? That was stated by the earlier sponsor, Your Honor. I don't want to repeat on that, but are we on target?
We're ahead of target, Your Honor. Especially, I think, at Customs.
That was not in the paper this morning. The paper says this morning that you are off target.
With respect to?
The both agency.
Your Honor,
It was in the major dailies, Your Honor.
Bakit iba yung nandito?
Let me elucidate a little, distinguished sponsor. On the second quarter of 2018, you're short by 35.5 billion. I'm talking about the BIR.
Ano nangyari? Ito iba naman. Oh. Well, Your Honor, you're right. January to July, there was a big slippage in July, Your Honor. But overall, Your Honor, January to July, which includes the first half performance, Your Honor, we're ahead by 62 billion, Your Honor. And that essentially was pulled down by a bad July, Your Honor. In terms of Bud July, Your Honor, BIR was down 55 billion from its target, while BOC was still ahead by 3.5 billion, Your Honor. So contrary to that report, Your Honor, I have the National Treasurer at my side, Your Honors.
Most of this question, distinguished sponsor, will just be redundant because we'll be asking this same question when the respective agency will be presenting their budget. So I'll just come up with some salient feature before I terminate my interpellation. Distinguished sponsor, can you identify the biggest factor that made it possible for inflation to exceed the government's upper forecast?
Number one, Your Honor, is definitely the top two is essentially energy, and number two is food. And if you look at the August figure, Your Honor, it is now food and energy at the same magnitude, Your Honor. In terms of energy, Your Honor, part of the energy accounted for 0.9 of the 6.4. So, of the 0.9, Your Honor, roughly much of that is 0.4 of that would be train, and the rest would be the 60% increase in global oil prices from $47 from end December 31 to the current $74, Your Honor. That's when I woke up this morning. And of course, the peso depreciation from 49 pesos per dollar in December 31 to the current, Your Honor, of 54.20, Your Honor. In terms of food, Your Honor, essentially, as the economic managers already mentioned, it's a case really of not importing early enough and not importing enough. Not early enough, and not enough, Your Honor, because much of the price is essentially driven by rice prices. And the other, Your Honor, of course, is fish, and that's essentially because of falling yields in our main fishing grounds, both in the seas as well as in internal waters. And the second, Your Honor, with respect to vegetable, that was really on account of the supply rigidities we incur because of the 2 weeks of continuous rains in August. And with respect to meat, Your Honor, I would say that especially with chicken, they were able to increase production by 6.8%, but still they increased their prices by 7%, which reflects not just cost push, but really very strong demand, Your Honor. And I think, Your Honor, there is both cost push and demand pull, Your Honor, that is affecting our inflation.
Well, distinguished sponsor, that long issues of finding out the silver bullet for this uncontrolled pricing of food commodities, I think we both agree that elimination of middlemen will play a major role.
That's right, Your Honor.
So,
in fact,
my question is this, maybe to be directed to DBM. The decision in the DOF, when we buy crude oil, is it a decision of the DOE, or did the other two agencies play a role on where to buy and when to buy?
it's free market, Your Honor. It is the oil companies who decide. If they want to buy more, buy ahead, or
No, my question is, us buying from them. Do the DOE and DOF and DBM participate in the decision of
Nope.
when to buy and where to buy?
Nope. I mean, with respect to the government demand for oil?
Yes.
Yeah, no. It's actually the individual agencies, Your Honor.
So it's DOE who decides?
No. It's really the individual agencies, Your Honor.
You mean to say you're talking about the private sector and doing their part of importing Shell and Petron?
That's right, Your Honor, because
And,
we are...
and we don't interfere?
No. Except by notification, Your Honor. The DOE is given prior notice with respect to intention to raise prices.
Meaning, they have a carte blanche of deciding
Yes.
where to buy and
Yes,
how
Your Honor.
much to buy.
But anybody can import if you want. So, in other words, Your Honor, the market is quite contestable. When you say contestable, Your Honor, there are no barriers to entry that are artificially placed by government, and therefore this will ensure that incumbent players will behave reasonably competitive, otherwise they invite new entry into their markets, and therefore leading to a loss of their market share and their, of course, their bargaining position vis-a-vis the buyers, Your Honor.
I just have my last concern, distinguished sponsor. I think that the best and the brightest technocrats and academicians, I presume, were drafted to work for our finance-related department and agencies. But still, our financial forecasts are off tangent. Is it reasonable then to state that during debates for finance-related proposal, such as the transition to cash-based system, their premises should be taken with a grain of salt?
I think, Your Honor, it's the best estimate, Your Honor, using reasonable estimations and assumptions. What we can do probably, Your Honor, is to have contingency planning, Your Honor, that can be built into the budget. We might decide to, let's say, increase the contingency budget appropriation. Or number two, Your Honor, is that we can have a band for each of the major assumptions, if it's GDP, inflation, forex, and interest rates, Your Honor. So in short, Your Honor, we can have that band, and therefore once those bands get breached, either on the upside or the downside, then, Your Honor, we can put automatic fiscal rules that will essentially allow or authorize certain government action, Your Honor, or executive action. So I think, Your Honor, the positive way of handling, because as a former research head myself, Your Honor, we do make a lot of mistakes. But those mistakes, Your Honor, are based on honest determination of what is a reasonable assumption that you can use. Otherwise, let's not just have a budget, Your Honor, because any estimate can be wrong, can go awry. And so, Your Honor, I think the affirmative way of addressing that, Your Honor, essentially by having one, probably if you really feel discomfort at the estimates being presented, then we can have a contingency plan. Second, we can probably have a band of estimates wherein if those bands are breached, then it should trigger certain government action, Your Honor.
Thank you, distinguished. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will just be delving on questions on the specific land agency.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Minority Floor Leader. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, the next person to interpolate is Congressman Mikey Romero of One Pacman Party List.
Honorable Mikey Romero, you are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will the honorable sponsor accept questions and clarifications from this representation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Actually, it's just a clarification on the part of the national budget. No? I would just like to ask, what is the policy right now? Yeah. What is the policy of government and basis for increasing budget? What is the government policy and basis for a 10 to 20% increases in our yearly budget? No? Although this year, 2019, we all know that we have a hybrid type of budgeting. No? But what is the basis? Because during the time of our former president, GMA, the national budget was just 1.4 trillion in 2009. And now in 2019, it's about 3.8 trillion. So the basic assumptions that the budget increases by about 14% every year. I would just like to be clarified on the basis of these incremental increases every year.
The principal guidance, Your Honor, is the growth target of the government, and the growth target is articulated in the Philippine Development Plan. So, Your Honor, whether if you want to make up for past years' mistakes or want to move forward certain of the goals, then that is the first input. The second input, Your Honor, is what is allowed by our revenues, Your Honor, based on the revenue program, as well as, of course, new taxes or privatization that we will come in. And then, Your Honor, after we come up with a revenue target or revenue estimate, then we set what is a reasonable deficit limit as percentage of GDP, Your Honor, that will not disrupt our credit standing. So, Your Honor, essentially, ang nangyari ngayon, we saw that our total revenue capacity is at 17%, of which 15.4% is taxes, plus 3%. That's why you come up, Your Honor, with a 20% expenditure as percentage of total GDP, Your Honor, for 2019.
Thank you, but I would just like to be clarified more on the policy of the government, because the GDP is growing just by about 6 to 8%. If the GDP is growing by 6 to 8 and our increases in national budget is about 14%, I would like to be more clarified on, you know, the difference in the national budget, because when we were in the corporate business, every little basis points of increases per basis points, we have to defend. So in this time, in terms of national budget, the incremental increases are almost more than double. So I would just like to be clarified so that next year when we do our budget again, we will be more or less, we know the policy that the government will undertake.
Ang pinaka-policy po, Your Honor, is that the budget should support the growth targets of the government, as well, of course, its mandate to provide safety net or social services for a more egalitarian society. Those are essentially the guiding philosophy. With respect to setting the number, Your Honor, number one, our nominal GDP actually is growing by 12%, Your Honor. Now, in order to sustain that 12%, Your Honor, a government may decide to forward or to accelerate your infrastructure project, because these are the growth elements of a certain budget. So, Your Honor, for example, our budget for DPWH is actually growing by 23% next year. That shows, Your Honor, that this government or we as a people want faster growth in the following years, not just this year or the next year, Your Honor, because an infrastructure, as I think you as businessman, will open up new business opportunities, will probably reduce the cost of doing business, and of course, expand markets, Your Honor. So yung policy ko talaga is growth and long-term faster growth. But if you want a higher goal, it is to become an upper middle income country, Your Honor. So in order to do that, you need growth in your per capita income. And in order to grow your per capita income, the budget is one of the instruments, because as of now, Your Honor, the government accounts for only 20% of the total GDP. But however, that portion of our GDP which provides public goods or goods that private companies will not do because it benefits a lot of other people, like roads, bridges, airports, Your Honor, need to be financed by government. So if you look at the growth-inducing elements of this budget, Your Honor, actually, we're ensuring that we will be in a platform for higher growth in the for the rest of the Duterte administration.
Thank you for your clarification. My next question is, how do we now fund our national budget in terms of percentages based on revenues, based on loans, local and international loans, and based on all other capital budgeting type of
Yung basically, Your Honor, dun sa Your Honor, out of the 3.757 trillion, Your Honor, the bulk of it will essentially be financed by internally generated revenues, or in short, non-repayable revenues. We are, however, looking at 421 billion that needs to be financed. Right now, Your Honor, it is 25% of the 421 will be financed by foreign loans and 75% by domestic loans.
So, Mr. Sponsor, the budget deficit right now is 421,
That's the target for 2019, Your Honor.
which is how much percentage of the national
3.2%, Your Honor.
3.2. So, in terms of our national debt, how much is our dollar-denominated debt right now?
23.4%, Your Honor.
And in terms of
But that includes both public and corporate foreign debt. So the foreign debt of the Philippine economy is 23.4. I would guess, Your Honor, that the government portion of that would be less than 10%. So the foreign debt of the national government is less than, I think, 9.6 or 9.
okay,
Less than 10%. You want an exact number? Total GDP. I'm sorry. FX. Yeah, 13%, Your Honor, sorry. So 11% of the 24 is actually private.
11%.
Yes, sir.
Okay. My last question, Mr. Distinguished Sponsor, is that out of all our international debts right now, what is the incremental increases in our peso debt in terms of the dollar devaluation? No? It has been said that one of the government agencies, PISALM, which is part of the power sector, a 1 peso increase in the devaluation of the peso is equivalent to 10 billion more liabilities by the government. So is this true?
For every 1 peso, Your Honor, it's 40 billion in terms of the aggregate value. But in terms of interest rate, Your Honor, it's actually 2.2 billion.
I'm sorry, can you clarify again? Sorry.
Pag yung utang po dati ngayon is 2.1 trillion 2.1 trillion forex-denominated debt. So, sa bawat palo ng piso, Your Honor, umaangat po yung halaga ng ating foreign debt by 40 billion.
14 or 40?
40.
40. So, each time that the peso devaluates by 1 peso, our loan increases by 40 billion.
Yes, that's right, Your
And
Honor.
how will we fund it?
Your Honor, kasi these are already fixed. So actually what matters most is how you refinance it. Because, for example, Your Honor, we will pay, how much will we pay this year? The interest payments on foreign loans of the government. No, that's, I need the forex. So yung out of the 353 billion, Your Honor, 1/3 po niya ng forex. So 120 billion, Your Honor, yung ating foreign interest payments, Your Honor. Ito po yung mga ROP. Basically, most of these are ROP and ODA. So yung kanilang nominal rates have been fixed upon issue. So ang mahalaga po din, Your Honor, kung how you refinance it, because you need to incur, let's say, in a period like this, higher interest rates in your new issuance. If you use foreign debt to repay foreign maturing obligations and match it with foreign. So Your Honor, ang sagot, dahil, minamatch mo ba? So minamatch po niya. So may natural hedge po siya sa short-term maturing loans.
Do we have a hedge on that?
Yes.
Are we?
Natural hedge because we have also coming from ODA.
No financial hedge. It's the hedging really is that it's being matched against our OD.
My question, distinguished sponsor, is that how do we fund any incremental increases in the foreign debt? No, for this
Valuation lang po yun, Your Honor. So ang importante po yung maturing foreign obligations, Your Honor. So yung maturing foreign obligation is 120 billion.
So the 40 billion that you're saying is actually the
Booking lang.
the principal value.
Kung ano po nag-appear, it's a booking exercise in your balance sheet.
Okay.
So it's not a cash flow item in your cash flow, your CS, your CFS, your cash flow statements.
Okay.
So, Your Honor, ang sagot sa iyo doon sa 40 billion, hindi ho yun nire-refinance. Ang kailangan po yung 120. So, doon sa 120, kaso may natural hedge tayo, Your Honor, kasi based po sa atin pong total, kasi meron din naman doon tayong we have revenues that are dollar-based. So for as long as the peso is not in a depreciation mode, for every 1 peso depreciation, it results in higher revenues of 8.8 billion and higher disbursements of 2.2 billion, and that is where that answers your question.
The 8.8 and the 2.2 is based on the remittances coming from our OFWs?
It is the earnings po ng BSP.
Because they're invested in...
Well, you must remember our entire GIR is essentially invested in U.S. Treasury notes, Your Honor. So the peso equivalent of that will also go higher. So actually, a 1 peso depreciation is positive 6.6 billion. Your Honor. It's not that we're making a policy, why don't we just devalue it to 100 pesos and then... But generally, Your Honor, within a certain band, the peso sensitivity is positive for the budget.
So, siguro I'll just ask for a computation of this.
Your Honor, a breakdown.
And if it's, what is the real nominal rate between the
yes.
Positive
can I
and the
ask now
negative?
already, magkano ba nominal rate natin yun sa peso issue? Anong ROP natin yun? Your latest ROP. The coupon, Your Honor, is 3%. That is the only thing we pay. So what is the coupon rate is that we pay. And the effective yield is upon trading, Your Honor, that the government has nothing to do with it unless you buy back. For example, if it's so cheap, then you can reduce your aggregate loan value, but you still pay 3% on your coupon rate, Your Honor. So there are certain treasury transactions that in fact, but I think our policy is conservative. Only in periods of massive volatility that we do come in really to stabilize, for example, our intervention in market.
Mr. Sponsor, is our GDP to loan ratio still at par with any other countries?
Pinakamababa ho tayo, Your Honor. In fact, kung Japan na pinag-uusapan, 320%. Kung Italy po, nasa 400%. So I mean, napakababa po, it reflects really the phobia that we had arising during the Marcos years, when suddenly, because of our huge indebtedness, so nung panahon pong yun, masyado malaki po yung foreign debt we used to finance our infrastructure. So when the yen, due to Plaza Accord in 1985, was appreciated from 287 yen per US dollar to roughly 156 yen per US dollar. So virtually, nag-increase po yung ating dollar-denominated our yen-denominated loans, when computed in dollars, suddenly more than doubled, Your Honor. So we have that sort of policy phobia of relying on foreign debt essentially to finance our operations. So only to the extent, Your Honor, that there is a natural hedge, like OFWs, like BPOs, Your Honor, that we go, especially taking advantage of lower rates available in global markets.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And to our economic managers, I salute you for being very, very much conservative with regards to our national debt. I rest my case, Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the next person to interpolate is Representative Edsel Lagman of the 1st District, Albay.
The gentleman from the 1st District of Albay, Honorable Edsel Lagman, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield?
Yes, Your Honor, to my savior.
Proceed.
Well, early in the budget season, you would recall, distinguished sponsor, the House, virtually as a whole, was against the cash-based budgeting, which is the cornerstone of the 2019 National Expenditure Program. My question is, what is now the position of the House leadership and the leadership of the Committee on Appropriations on this issue?
Actually, Your Honor, if you base it, and you were debating, and for 2 days, you kept me up, and essentially it was being sponsored by the Committee on Appropriations, Your Honor. The Budget Reform Act, Your Honor. So in short, Your Honor, we are in favor of cash-based budgeting, Your Honor. It's really the perceived abruptness of the shift, Your Honor, because there were expectations that the shift to cash-based budgeting needed a law, and therefore, since we approved it and the Senate has not, and therefore we were not expecting that there will be a sudden shift to cash-based budgeting for the 29 budget. But going through it, Your Honor, is that it doesn't really need a law. We were trying, the law was meant to essentially institutionalize cash-based budgeting so that future budget will be guided by this new law that you actually helped perfect, not perfect, but rather make more reasonable. So, Your Honor, the position of the Committee on Appropriations is that based on our sponsorship of the BRA, is that we are in favor of cash-based budgeting, Your Honor.
Well, just a correction. I helped try to perfect the Budget Reform Act, but there are still some deficiencies in that bill, so much so that I did not vote in its favor during the second and third reading.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, we have been hearing that there has been a compromise formed between the House and the DBM on this problem on cash-based budgeting versus obligation-based appropriation. May we know whether there is such a compromise?
Yes, Your Honor, there is an agreement already. From the current 12 plus 3, finished at 12, payment additional 3 months. Now, for capital outlay, Your Honor, our budget will have provisions that essentially puts it at 15 plus 3. 15 to implement and 3 to pay. So that's what we call hybrid. But it doesn't go for the rest of the budget, only for capital outlays, Your Honor.
Then how will this compromise be effected in the 2019 General Appropriations Act.
Which,
The compromise, the one you have just said. How will this be affected in our General Appropriations Bill?
essentially, Your Honor, it affects, of course, we have a 1.1 trillion in capital, in essentially our capital, in the total capital outlay of the government. So essentially, Your Honor, it covers that 1.1 trillion embedded in our general appropriations proposal.
No. Will there be some changes in the appropriation items, or will there be new special provisions or general provisions to effect the compromise?
There may be a general provision, Your Honor, or a specific provision for every time there is a CEO that appears.
No. What is the general provision, for example?
Your Honor, it's...
How should the general provision be coined?
I'm not a lawyer, but I guess, Your Honor, it merely says that...
You are
it
a
should-
budget expert. Does not need a lawyer to
I know.
coin a general provision.
I know more, Your Honor. We will coin it, Your Honor, and we will provide you with freshly minted language within the day, Your Honor.
No, I'm asking now because we should be prepared for that. Considering that you said that there is a compromise, the compromise will be effected in the General
We
Appropriations
will
Act,
write it, Your Honor.
and there will be means to do that.
Well,
What are the means now?
I appeal to my neighbor. You have to be love thy neighbor. So can I be given at least within this day to give you a copy of the freshly minted language for the so-called hybrid, when in fact it's merely an extended implementation for essentially...
Also with respect to some changes in the budgetary items or figures, and also the specific or special provisions.
Yes, Your Honor. I think in general, Your Honor, this provision will keep on appearing whenever there is a CO or there can be an upfront special provision.
Well, you know, this debate is not only between two neighboring districts, the first district of Albay and the second district of Albay. It concerns the entire country. And we are here interpolating and responding on behalf of the entire country, on behalf of the House of Representatives.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I don't think we should be invoking neighborhood affinity.
Yeah, I agree. But I want a good neighbor.
I beg your pardon?
Your Honor, no, it's no.
Yeah. I heard the distinguished sponsor saying that train is partly responsible.
Yes.
To what percent again is the train culpable for this inordinate escalation of the inflation rate?
Your Honor, if that's 6.4, Your Honor, I would estimate that given the fact that it affects all the others, including transportation costs, Your Honor, I would say 1.1%. But direct impact, Your Honor, would be 0.4.
And what would be the rest responsible for this inflation rate?
As the President says, Donald Trump. Because, Your Honor, after the Iran sanctions, Your Honor, were renewed, I think the global oil prices rose from $47 to $74 last night. And not due to Trump, but generally because of the strength in the U.S. currency, then the peso depreciated from 49 to 54. So, Your Honor, that would account for half. The other half would essentially be food, and half of food would essentially be rice, Your Honor. So it's really our being not importing enough and not importing early enough, Your Honor. So as of now, Your Honor, probably our buffer stock is only about 100,000, although we are importing 787,000 more before October 15, Your Honor. So we expect arrivals of new rice shipments immediately before within the period, Your Honor, especially that we're trying now. What we're trying to calibrate really is the arrival, because harvest season is now starting in Isabela and Cagayan, although in our province, actually, the harvest season is in October and November, Your Honor.
Assuming that the President is correct, that part of the problem is due to the policies of Mr. Trump. So that would have a global effect?
Yes.
That's correct. But if that is true, why is it that the Philippines has 6.4% inflation rate as of August, while the rest of the ASEAN have much lower rates?
Number one, Your Honor, because they produce their own oil.
Let me just go to the statistics. Anyway, it's here. Vietnam has 4.5%. Indonesia, 3.2%. Thailand, 1.5%. Malaysia, 0.9%. And Singapore, 0.6%. So that Trump alibi has no global effect, really. And it could be a wrong assumption because other countries do not suffer the same inordinate escalation in the inflation rate.
Because they produce their own oil, Your Honor. So in fact, many of them are net exporter, and therefore they use their exports receipt to essentially subsidize the domestic cost or price, pump prices, Your Honor. It is well known, Your Honor, that one of the key disadvantages of the Philippines in international investment competitiveness is the fact all our competitors are paying for almost half of the electricity prices, Your Honor. So unless we have the money to essentially do the same, then we probably have to do other things in order to get our fair share of the investments, Your Honor. So the answer, Your Honor, is that they have their own oil. In fact, some of them are net exporter and therefore benefit. Third is that they subsidize their domestic pump prices. And fourth, Your Honor, if I must add, they have plenty of rice.
Well, that's good to know that they are not affected by inflation because they have their own oil. They
That's
produce
right.
their own oil. More over and above that, they subsidize the pump price of oil.
Correct.
Look at the Philippines. We do not have, or we do not produce our oil. We are subject to the global prices. Yet, we impose new excise taxes on oil under the trade. Is that a recommendable policy?
Your Honor, it's an entire debate, Your Honor, but being one of the proponents of Train 1, it's simply because, Your Honor, of the consumption pattern.
Incidentally, I was not a proponent of
Me,
Train 1.
Your Honor, yes.
I objected to it.
Because roughly, Your Honor, 53.8% of all the oil and energy in this country is consumed by the top 10%, Your Honor. And the idea, Your Honor, is that if you tax this, then you tax Ayala. But since it will affect the lower classes, the lower income classes, Your Honor, we can return, but we will not return to Henry C. We will not return the taxes paid by Ayala. We will not return So, Your Honor, that was supposed to be an egalitarian strategy that essentially tries to tax the rich while returning whatever impact in more than just returning the estimated amount, incremental amount that they pay, but in fact increase social services to the lowest 50%, Your Honor. But I think, Your Honor, that would be a long debate, Your Honor.
Yeah. Well, I just would like to underscore that we are not producing our own oil. We do not subsidize the pump prices of oil. Yet, over and above this, we still impose additional excise taxes on petroleum products. And excise taxes would be cascading. They cascade to the almost empty pockets of the marginalized Filipinos. So that is just the point I was trying to drive up. Now, what is the Duterte administration doing to address the problem of the train being a culprit in the inordinate hike of inflation rate?
Your Honor, you see the pump prices went up by 15 as of yesterday. But we only imposed 275, Your Honor. So even if we remove 275, Your Honor, you still have to contend with the 1225.
Yeah, but so at least you remove something, you reduce the effects of inflation.
It's a
but
far
is
better,
the government doing that?
Because, Your Honor, that will be returning a lot of 54% will just go to Ayala in Henry C. So you might as well return whatever you have and directly give it to the poorer classes, Your Honor. So, I mean, it makes more sense. I think this issue about returning, I think makes, in fact, enhances the argument for Tring, because if we do reduce the excise tax, who benefits? 54% of the benefit go to Ayala, not to the poor people.
Well, I think the distinguished sponsor, not now but later, could document that accusation. Now,
okay. Sorry. Example.
Are there complementary measures which government should pursue
Yes,
in
Your Honor.
order to address the inflation rate?
Yes, Your
And
Honor.
what are these complementary measures?
Number one, Your Honor, is that outside of importing more rice, Your Honor, we are giving fuel discounts, essentially to the transportation sector. We're providing 2,400 in unconditional cash transfers to 2.6 million families in the listahanan, and eventually it will include 4.4 million. And then next year, this 200 pesos per month will grow to 300, and that is in our budget. We have a 36 billion embedded in the 2019 General Appropriations Bill, Your Honor. So in general, Your Honor, it is an income augmentation process, Your Honor. So there are other things, Your Honor, that can directly address the vulnerable, that those that are being affected by inflationary pressure, Your Honor. I think the DSWD can accelerate and intensify their food feeding program in the elementary schools. The DSWD can also intensify their feeding program, because food, Your Honor, is the culprit for inflation. And therefore, Your Honor, I think the first thing that you do is to give immediate safety nets to the. And then with respect to other things, Your Honor, and which probably I may propose, in addition to fuel discounts, I think fishermen should be given fuel discounts, Your Honor, especially small fishermen, Your Honor, not just the transport sector, because their ability to earn income is also being hampered by the higher oil prices, Your Honor. So I think we have a slew of measures that are meant to mitigate the impact of higher inflation on the poor, Your Honor.
Those are better said than done. Those short-sighted measures. But let us go to food. When you say food is a culprit in the inflation, what do you mean?
Because food prices went up, Your Honor. For example, in Albay, fish went up by 27 points, vegetable went up by 27.7%. Fish went up by 20%. Corn went up by 17.7%. And rice went up by 12.5%, Your Honor. So, Your Honor, 63% of the 60% of the budget of the consumption basket of the lowest 30% is actually food, Your Honor. So I would say that the real culprit in terms of the negative consequences of high inflation is actually due to high food prices, Your Honor.
When you say food as a culprit,
no, food
the
prices.
distinguished gentleman means the adequacy of food supply as well as the price of food items.
That's right,
Is
Your
that
Honor.
correct? And what is government doing to address the situation?
Well, one by one, Your Honor. With respect to vegetables, Your Honor, including the price of sili, I think, Your Honor, the government has set out, number one, kasi yung presyo pong yun ay apektado lang nung, it was affected by the 2 weeks of continuous rains affecting our vegetable bowl, which is really the Caldera. Now that it has, after Umpong, it's starting to stabilize, what we trying to do is to have a logistical network to be paid for by the government with, I think, refrigeration so that it can reach, the supply can reach the Bicol. And in terms of fish, Your Honor, although the certificate of necessity, which was given only to Metro Manila markets, now, Your Honor, I think that they will issue certificate of necessity to the rest of the major wet markets. With respect to rice, Your Honor, the order of the President is to release all 330,000 metric tons that are now or about to be that are in the hands of or about to be delivered to NFA, and increasing our importation of rice by additional of 787,000 metric tons, Your Honor. So with respect, Your Honor, to fish, vegetables, and fish, vegetables, fish, rice, corn. I think, Your Honor, I pretty much covered all the major items of the typical.
These are the things the government proposes to do. I hope it will be done. But may we know from the distinguished sponsor whether the Duterte administration expected this inordinate hike in the inflation rate?
I think, Your Honor, it would have been reasonable, really, but to expect that there will be such policy volatility arising from the election of Donald Trump. Because the return of sanctions in Iran was the principal trigger for the rise in global oil prices. Once it was announced, Your Honor, it increased the oil price from $47 to $74. So sometimes, Your Honor, by just looking at, for example, that we cannot divorce politics, global politics from the global economy. So there would have been, but it's very difficult, Your Honor, to pin down if he does or does not return to the Iran sanctions. But when he dumped the JCO, I forgot the joint on the nuclear weapons of Iran, it should have been expected already. So the thing that would have been done is that these are global factors that you don't control, and therefore what is more possible is that we have the contingency plan. In fairness to the President and this administration, Honor, as early as March, you can already look at the news cycle where the President expressed his desire to the Cabinet of coming up with measures to essentially bring inflation back to the 2 to 4% band, which is our PDP target and our target for 2018, Your Honor.
Well, no less than the government's economic managers themselves acknowledge that inflation in August was beyond the median market forecast.
Yes, correct.
Correct. And I think the government was not really prepared for this inordinate increase. But it could have been already written on the wall, because from an average of 1.0% in 2015 until the first half of 2016, the monthly inflation rate rose in 2016 from 1.3% in July to 2.2% in December. Reached in 2017 a peak of 3.2% in May, before slightly falling to 2.9% in December. It steadily crept from 3.4% in January to 5.2% in June 2018. And now it is 6.4%. But with respect to essential food items, it is even much higher, because the basket was food and non-essential, not limited to essential food and non-beverages.
That's right.
But if we consider only the latter basket, it would be much higher than 6.4%. Is that correct?
By 100 basis points. That, I think the inflation of the poor can be estimated at about 7.4%, Your Honor.
Now, let me go to some general principles. Of course, we're not debating here as routinary. We are debating here for import and substance. And in the process of debating, there can be some amendments, alterations, or even deletions in the JAB, in the General Appropriations Bill, as photocopied from the NEP, except for the realignment yesterday.
Yes, Your Honor.
So the leadership of the House and the leadership of the committee would be amenable to entertain warranted amendments, modifications, alterations, or even deletion in the General Appropriations Act, because it is not cast in stone. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we welcome that attitude from the de facto defender of the 2018 General Appropriations Act. Now, as a general principle, distinguished sponsor, should lump sum appropriations perpetuate themselves in the General Appropriations Bill and the General Appropriations Act?
Only so far, Your Honor, is that if their contents or their nature, Your Honor, if it's in the nature of that expenditure, cannot be specified during the budgeting process, Your Honor. For example, MPBS, the Miscellaneous Personal Benefits Fund, for Your Honor, we cannot have a budget without it, Your Honor.
Okay.
Or the ERA Fund, Your Honor, which is automatically appropriated anyway, Your Honor. These are funds that I think, or the interest on the debt service fund, Your Honor, wherein maybe it is a best estimate, although it's also automatic appropriating, but there may be changes in the financing policy of the government, there may be changes in the interest rates or in the exchange rate, Your Honor. So these funds become lump sum because they are subject to certain preconditions, Your Honor, before but the conditions for their utilization are well defined anyway, Your Honor.
Okay. And one of these lump sums would be the contingent fund of the President. Is that correct?
That's right, Your Honor.
When the distinguished sponsor was chairman of the Committee on Appropriation, would he recall how much was the contingent fund of the President?
2 billion?
2 billion.
Yes, Your Honor.
2 billion. When I was chair, that was more or less the same amount.
Yes.
But now, the contingent fund of the President has ballooned to 13 billion. Is that correct?
3-0 ba? I think, Your Honor, if you consider as percentage of GDP, Your Honor, I would say since I was chair in 2006, 2005, 2006, and you were chair at 2007, 2008. So the full 10 years, Your Honor, I would say, Your Honor, as percentage of GDP, Your Honor, I think they will still come out as a reasonable.
You know, the contingent fund is not based on estimation. The contingent fund is based on what would be unforeseen.
Correct. And generally, Your Honor, what is unforeseen will be based on the magnitude of the economy and the magnitude of the budget.
Would the distinguished sponsor confirm that it is now 13 billion?
13 ba? Yes, Your Honor, it's 13.
And it was 13 billion this year?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, may we know, is there a balance in the contingent fund of the President as of today? From the 13 billion?
2017, wala. In 2018, Your Honor, there's still 5 billion.
5 billion. And we are about to end the year.
That's right.
So, most probably there is an overestimation of the need for the contingency. I'm saying this because during our amendatory process, we could review the lump sums, including the contingent fund, so that we could slash some of these funds, considering that as of now, 13 billion, there is still a remaining of 5 billion unspent in the contingent fund of the President. Now, I would also suggest that we look at the intelligence and the confidential funds across the bureaucracy, across the government.
Magkano ba? Total intelligence fund.
Would the distinguished gentleman know how much is the total in 2019 of the intelligence and confidential funds?
1 minute. Magkano lahat? Magkano lahat? Your Honor, in 2019, the total intelligence expense is 3.8 billion, which is lower than the 5.6 billion last year. Confidential expense remains at about the same amount, in fact lower, at 2.448 versus 2.462. So in short, Your Honor, in 2018, we had 8.075 billion in intelligence fund versus 6.3 billion in 2019, Your Honor.
So what is the total as proposed in 2019 for both the intelligence fund and the confidential fund?
6,284,052.
Okay. And out of that, how much is embedded in the office of the President proper?
In the office of the President, Your Honor, it is 2.5 for both. So 1.25 split 50-50. 1,250 for intelligence and 1,250 for confidential.
So it's a total of 2,500,000,000.
That's right, Your Honor.
And what percentage is that of the total intelligence fund across the bureaucracy?
That's roughly about 40% of the total, Your Honor.
How much?
That's 40%
40%.
of the total.
I think we should be able to scrutinize the intelligence fund. and find out where we could make some alterations or modifications or even deletion,
Yes, Your Honor.
so that we could fund more projects which are responsive to the needs of our people.
I agree.
So I hope that will be done. Now, let us also go to the MOE, because this could be a place where we could hide some fat. Would the distinguished gentleman know how much is the total MOE as proposed in 2019?
Yes, Your Honor. The total MOE for 2019, Your Honor, is 1.394 trillion. 1,394,932,231, or roughly 37.1% of the total.
Okay. Would the distinguished gentleman agree that we should look very keenly and efficiently and effectively on the vast MOE appropriations where possible fat can be hidden?
By definition, Your Honor, ERA is actually an MOE for the national government.
Well, except those which are mandatory. Look at the traveling expenses under MOE. For 2019, the proposal is 16,933,892. Is that correct?
Actually, it's 17,226,620.
It's even higher.
That's right, Your Honor. Last year is 16,999,593.
And look at the professional services. That's 23 billion.
That's right, 24,316,495.
What are these professional services?
Consultancies, JOs,
Yeah, I think we should be able to
job
look at
orders,
this.
MOA,
Would the
memorandum
distinguished,
of agreements.
would the distinguished sponsor agree that we could look into these figures on the professional
Yes, Your
services?
Honor, we will definitely, but I think the end result of that is that we need to expand the bureaucracy. Because we have, in order to avail of those services, we need the talent of these people, then we have to make them permanent when we don't have to.
It does not mean to say that when we reduce the number of consultants, we are going to hire permanent personnel. But there could be an excess of consultants.
Yes, Your Honor, I would definitely
which we
willing
should
to
excise from the MOE.
Yes, Your Honor. I think we're willing to study, review. As we have already reviewed by departments, Your Honor, now as a composite, Your Honor, this proposed professional fees of 24 billion, Your Honor. But it may be difficult, Your Honor, because this year, the professional services is 34,760,995. So it's already lower by 10 billion.
Yeah.
So, Your Honor, I don't know.
That's precisely the point. Last year, it could have been overstated.
No,
now,
this year.
despite its reduction, it could still be overstated. So we,
Yes, I
we should be
agree.
able to do that.
I agree, Your Honor. We are willing to work with you.
Now, there is an item under MOE called donations.
Yes.
And how much is the proposed donations for 2019?
51 million? 51 billion?
Is that 51 million or 51 billion?
Billion.
Billion. It's 51 billion in donations. And what are these donations?
Your Honor, to be very specific, may I ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. Speaker, so I can really tell the real story?
1 minute suspension. Session resumes.
That's a short break for a real story.
The real story, Your Honor, is because I forgot that it's really the conditional cash transfer. They're booked under donations.
Conditional cash transfer.
Correct, Your Honor, the whole thing.
Why should it be under donation?
Your Honor,
should
may
it
one-
not be under the exact nomenclature?
May I,
1 minute suspension. Oo nga naman. And nagpe-preside ako sa session. Hello?
Speaker.
Session resumes.
Thank you. In answer to the honorable gentleman from the First District of Albay, may I refer him to page 1139, and it's called Section 5, Donations. Departments, bureaus, and other offices of the national government, including constitutional offices enjoying fiscal autonomy and SUKs, accept donations to.
Oh. Ano ba yan?
May I ask for 1 minute suspension? I am reading the...
Minute suspension.
You can have 2 minutes suspension.
Walang...
Erase.
Asan yung ano? They're giving me the wrong donation.
mismo nakausap mo? Si Yusek Louie, Pangulayan? Siya mismo nakausap mo? Ano sabi? More than 2 years, ha? Hindi ko maintindihan talaga kung bakit hindi maaksyonan. I'm not saying kung anong gawin. Either yes or no. Kung pwede o hindi. Hindi, merong land which was donated by the landowner, agrarian reform beneficiary, to DepEd for the construction of school building. Sinat-challenge niya ng isang constituent doon na kalaban na hindi raw pwede yan magawin sapagkat kailangan may convention na etc. Ang problema nga, hindi nga ito walang personality itong co-contest. Saka isa pa, the state itself made the conversion because it was made part of the area of construction of school.
Sir,
Session resumes.
thank you very much, Your Honor. We finally found it. The 51.768 billion consists of CHED 49037, DA-OSEC 2.3 billion. So the 49 billion is essentially for the funding of the universal access to quality tertiary education, including about 16 billion for SUCs, 3 billion for LUCs, and the rest for tertiary education vouchers. So the rest, Your Honor, it's 49 plus 2.3, it's roughly about 51 billion, Your Honor. So I think, Your Honor, there's no savings that may be reasonably be squeezed from this item.
And
May I take back, Your Honor, however, the 51 billion as earlier defined as referring to unconditional cash transfer.
And,
Conditional cash transfer.
this should also include the cash transfers?
No more, Your Honor.
No more. Now, anyway, I hope that we could recast the language to reflect what they really are.
Yes, that's right.
Rather than subsume it under a general or generic lingo of donations.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, I would be ending my interpellation. Thank you for accommodating my questions. And I will be donating the rest of my time to the next interpreter.
Thank you, Honorable Edsel Lagman, for terminating your brilliant interpellation. Majority Floor Leader,
Mr. Speaker.
are there any more interpellators?
Yes, there are a lot more.
Yeah, proceed.
The next one to interpolate our sponsor is the Honorable Lito Atienza of the Buhay Party List.
Honorable Lito Atienza, you are recognized. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Salamat po, Madam Majority Floor Leader. I reserve the right to interpellate a gentleman in due time. At this point, I just would like to manifest a reaction to what has been said earlier.
Proceed with your manifestations.
To set the rules of this ongoing debate on the budget. Ang sabi po ng ating Senior Deputy Majority Leader na kung maaari ang itinatanong lang ng ating mga miyembro ay mga intelligent questions. Doon po kami nagre-react. Sapagkat naniniwala akong lahat ng miyembro ng Kongreso ay intelligent representatives of the people.
I agree. I agree with the gentleman.
No one can say...
He was just trying to emphasize that everyone are intelligent.
But I would like to emphasize, also for the record, that no matter how seemingly impertinent questions are, it should be entertained and answered with clarity. And that should never be the issue, the intelligence or non-intelligence of the question.
Thank you.
By the very word interpellate, if the gentleman would look at the meaning of the word, it is precisely to interrupt the one who's speaking with questions of his own. It comes from the root word interpellare, magtanong, questionin. At hindi dapat sasabihin, ang sasagutin ko lang, intelligent questions. Second, again, he also mentioned, for the record, as his opinion, that we should be speaking only in English if possible. That, again, is belittling the character, the capacity, ang kakayahan ng bawat membro nitong kongresong ito na tayo magsasalita sa English lamang. Ito po ba ay kongreso ng Amerika, kongreso ng Inglaterra, o ito'y kongreso ng Pilipinas? Ang dahilan po ng aming pagtayo rito ay upang pagsalita. Ilagay naman sa ating titik din that the minority takes exception to that particular position of the senior deputy majority. And we hope and we are sure that the Speaker does not share that kind of a thinking. We are even sure that the majority leader, Congressman Andaya, would not share that thinking. And having said that, we hope that the senior majority, deputy majority leader is clarified on his misgivings, which is bordering on an intellectual arrogance, which I will call. Let us not belittle any opinion of any member in this chamber. Siguro kung tayo walang takot at nakapagsasalita ng malaya, hindi po lulusot yung ating napunang 51 billion pesos na naka-insert sa budget na sana'y tinatalakay natin ngayon. So we have to speak freely, and I encourage all members to do the same. Let us not be cowed, intimidated by an opinion of somebody who may not be respecting your capacity to represent your districts. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Speaker. We would want that to be of record in this deliberation.
The manifestation of Honorable Lito Atienza is duly noted. Majority Floor Leader.
The next member who wishes to interpolate, our sponsor is the Honorable Mahmoud Mending of Party List Amin.
Thank you. Honorable Mahmoud Mending, you are recognized. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Would the enigmatic sponsor accept some questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, taking my cue from the Honorable Lagman, let me invite your attention to Section 60 of House Bill number 8169, the General Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2019. If I may read, Mr. Speaker, Section 60, Annual Cash-Based Appropriations. The government hereby adopts the annual cash-based appropriations, which limits incurring obligations to goods delivered and services rendered, inspected, and accepted within the fiscal year, while payments therefore shall be made until the extended payment period of 3 months from the end of the preceding fiscal year. So the question of the Honorable Lagman a while ago was about cash-based budgeting. And if I remember it right, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, the answer of our distinguished sponsor pertained to a distinction between payments for the non-capital outlay and the capital outlay. Did you answer that there is an extended period of payment, if that is right, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Yes, Your Honor. The so-called hybrid that was actually will be reflected. In other words, this section will be changed to reflect from 12 plus 3 to 15 plus 3, Your Honor.
So implementation, meaning to say implementation that refers to the goods delivered, services rendered, inspected, and accepted, does not pertain to within the fiscal year. The amendment will be 15 months. Is that correct, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
I beg to seek your understanding. It will refer to fiscal year. So in other words, it will be 15 months, 12 December plus 3. So you're expected to deliver, get inspected by March of the following year.
So the extended payment period is from April to June, end of June. Is that
Yes,
correct,
that's
Mr.
correct,
Sponsor?
Your Honor.
Thank you. My next question pertains to the assistance or financial assistance to LGUs because they are treated specially, and their period is December 31, 2020. So may I know what is the valid distinction between financial assistance to LGUs as compared to the national government?
I think, Your Honor, it merely recognizes the fact that some of our local government units should be afforded as much leeway as possible in order that their contribution to nation building through the utilization of the national budget would be, they're given more leeway, essentially, in simple language.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. This financial assistance to LGUs, to what fund does it refer to in the General Appropriations Bill?
Kano ba yun?
It includes the LGSF, the assistance to disadvantaged municipalities. What are they?
It's under the LGSF, Your Honor.
Everything in the LGSF is what is covered by this provision. Is that correct, Mr. Speaker?
Until the end of the following fiscal year.
Because there is a program under the DILG called Assistance to Disadvantaged Municipalities, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Is that included?
Yes, Your Honor. I think that should naturally have the same logic, same nature, and therefore should have the same leeway, Your Honor.
It includes the Salintubig program, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Anything about LG, Your Honor, the policy is to give them as much leeway, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, because I agree that the local government units should be given more time to implement because of the, they are required more documentary requirements, and they have additional requirements as compared to the implementation of the national government. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. My next question pertains to net borrowings, which amounts to 1 trillion. Is that correct, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Yes. Yes,
To say the government is going to borrow 1 trillion for 2019, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor.
That's right, Your Honor.
So aside from these borrowings, net borrowings of 1 trillion, how much do we expect from our collections on the Train 1, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Actually, Your Honor, the contribution of Train 1 should be about, because more than half of it goes to actually finance the lower net personal income tax. So I would say, Your Honor, the net would be about 90 billion, Your Honor.
So an additional 90 billion income for our country.
But that's
for the
already in
2019.
the revenue assumption.
That's the assumption, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor.
Kasama na po sa revenue assumption natin. 90 billion from Train 1.
I incorporated in the total.
Opo.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, because I was just wondering how come we are going to borrow a total of 1 trillion and there is an additional income coming from Train 1, and yet the government's expenditure program is going to shrink as compared to 2018, because net of debt burden, 2019 proposed is only 2.260 trillion, not, not including the SPF. Would my numbers be correct, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Including the?
The expenditure program net of debt burden for the
Yes.
Department's national government for 2019 proposed is 2.260 trillion. For 2018, adjusted already, it is 2.360 trillion. Meaning to say the government is going to program less than the current year. Would that be correct, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
From an obligation to cash-based, Your Honor, probably yes. But if you do the cash-based equivalent, Your Honor, it's actually higher by 13%, Your Honor.
I beg to disagree, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. If you check in the budget expenditures and source of financing, this is how you look at the numbers on the expenditure program, net of debt burden. According to this book of tables of the budget expenditures and source of financing, the proposed for 2019 is 2.260 trillion, and the adjusted for 2018 is 2.360 trillion. There is a difference of 100 billion, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. If my numbers are correct, if my reading of the BESF is correct, then these are the numbers.
Comparing the obligation as against this one.
Yeah, pero can I approach you and look at, thank you, Mr. 1 minute.
1 minute suspension.
I'm hungry.
2018, 2360.
Adjusted na ba ito?
Yes, adjusted na yung 2018.
Hindi yan ang adjusted. Hindi man siya cost-based. May cost-based equivalent.
260.
Hindi yung cost-based.
Pero, kung saan naman. Session resumes.
Yun nga problema dito eh. 332 minus 417 yan. Hindi. Minus 32354. Can you give me, because I need to relate to the, I want to be as specific as possible. Hindi mali yung ano niyo. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
With this, yeah, go ahead.
Ang comparable po ng 2260 nyo po ay 1942735,396, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. May we know how did you arrive at that number, Mr.
Well,
Speaker?
it's based on
distinguished
the Modified Disbursement Plan called MDP. Ito po based po sa estimate ng DBM kung ano po yung mga project pa na matatapos po ng kanilang mga ahensya. I can provide you a copy, Your Honor, of these itemized numbers that compose the 19. You want it by departments? Or you want it
no,
the whole?
Mr. Speaker, distinguished
May
sponsor,
I
just the totals.
Sa akin to eh. May I just give you a copy because I asked the same question. So
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, because I wanted to understand how did they arrive at that figure. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, I'm satisfied for the 2018. I did just look at the numbers. But the point that I am driving at, Mr. Speaker, is, distinguished sponsor, if you look at the 2017 actual expenditures of the government, it is 2.27 trillion. And yet, we are programming for 2019, 2.260 trillion. That is still 10 billion less as compared to 2017. So my question is, why are we programming to spend less, and yet we impose a revenue measure? And we are going to increase government loans to 1 trillion in total. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, yun lang po yung gusto kong malaman. Bakit lumiliit yung programa ng expenditure ng gobyerno?
kung titingnan mo, Your Honor, kasi yung budget natin from 1.9 trillion, itataas mo ng 2.3 trillion yung mga departments. So may 400 billion po doon na inangat.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished sponsor. I understand for the 2018 comparison, that is merely an estimate. But what I'm talking about is 2017 actual. We actually spent 2.270 expenditure program net of debt burden for 2017.
Actual na yun, di ba?
So now we are programming 2.260 trillion, 10 billion lower than 2017 actual figures. That
Those
is
are
what I'd
actual-
like to understand.
Actual obligations pa rin po yan. So, ibig sabihin, paka-obligate, binibilang na po, pero hindi pa nababayaran yung iba. Samantalang yung kino-compare po natin na 1926, ang ibig po sabihin yan, ginastos at yun ang perang lalabas sa gobyerno ngayong 2018, yung 1.926. So, I haven't asked the DBM, I've probably asked them, yung doon sa 2.3 na 2017, kung magkano din po yung cash base. Ano po yung cash base? Magkano talaga yung perang lumabas para sa mga departamento? Kasi yung iba po doon, hindi pa nababayaran dahil nga po noon, pinapayagan po natin sila ng halos 2 taon bago po mabayaran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Maybe I read it mistakenly, but to my understanding, if it's actual for 2017 already, that's what you spent.
Actually obligated, Your Honor.
So thank you. So we need a comparison
Yes,
to be able to understand how much is our expenditure program growing.
Yes, Your Honor. I will definitely ask for an apples-to-apples comparison, Your Honor, between 2019 cash base, 2018, which we have now, cash base, and 2017 cash base. So I think we need one more data series for the 2017 cash-based actual cash program of the government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. May I also request for their formula at arriving at that total? How were they able to get, how were they able to call out the cash based for 2017 and 2018 because it is obligation based? So what was the formula used? Don't answer it now. Just please give us a formula.
Yes.
At arriving at the figures. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
My next question is Section 19 of the General Appropriations Bill. It talks about early procurement in the second paragraph. If I may read, Mr. Speaker. Agencies shall likewise undertake early procurement activities from pre-procurement conference until post-qualification of bids as soon as the proposed national budget is submitted to Congress
19.
in accordance with the guidelines issued by the GPPB. The issuance of notice of award of contract may, however, be done only upon approval of enactment of their respective appropriations or budget authorization document and based on the amount authorized therein. To what does this pertain to, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor? Does this pertain to the 2019 proposed General Appropriations
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Because this might lead to absurdity, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, because this is just an appropriations bill. It becomes a law later on. Meaning to say, this proposed Section 19 second paragraph is held nugatory. Wala na pong kwenta. Kasi paano mo uutusan, kung maging batas man ito, tapos na nga yung supposed to be early procurement, di ba? 2019 na ito mag-i-effect ang batas na to .
Pero actually, Your Honor, alos ganun din yan yung 2017 para sa 2018. So, ang ibig kong sabihin, Your Honor, it's already a practice and thus far, Your Honor, wala naman nung lumabas ng mga problema dahil po sa section na to. So, karamihan po, alimbawa, yung mga malalaki pong budget, nagsisimula na po sila mag-procurement and pre-procurement ng mga October, Your Honor, para nga, lalong-lalo na ngayon, na nag-shift tayo sa cost-based budgeting dito sa budget na to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Ang point ko po kasi dito, DBM circular yan . So, they authorized the agencies to conduct early procurement, which is very advantageous to increasing the capacity to absorb the budget of the agencies, of which I agree. Ang tinatanong ko lang po is, bakit pa siya nakalagay dito sa General Appropriations Bill na hindi naman siya pakikinabangan? This provision is useless.
Well, Your Honor, so we can do without it? Pwede natin patanggal to? Bakit? Pero may 9184 naman . Lagi natin nilalagay, Your Honor, pero mukhang gusto mong tanggalin?
Of course. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, thank you. Let me go to my next question.
Yes.
Section 20 talks about the procurement service of the DBM. Reading from the annual audit reports of several agencies, there is always that mention of the procurement service of the DBM. A lot of monies of departments or agencies are with the procurement service of the DBM. Number one reason is Section 20. So my question, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, is, does it have a contributory delay to our delivery of government services because of the non-procurement of these common use supplies? Kasi pinakauna po dito, common use supplies, nire-require. Kukuha ka sa procurement service ng DBM. And yet, matagal yung delivery, hindi na-conduct yung procurement.
Matagal ba delivery?
Or maaaring mali yung reading ko doon sa annual audit report, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Pwede ko lang po bang malaman kung meron bang delay sa deliveries or procurement under the DBM procurement service, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Yung na-note po ng COA, actually, pag tinignan mo po yung pag dinisaggregate nyo po kung ano talaga yung problema, it is really the difficulty of agencies to come out with their own terms of references to guide the procurement service. And of course, there's always that prospect of failed biddings. In general, Your Honor, the procurement service has the capacity to undertake procurement, and it has 10 procurement divisions, bids and award committees doing full-time procurement, Your Honor. So I think, Your Honor, I haven't heard really anything that would probably make me question the efficiency and effectiveness of the procurement service.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. If I may specify, the PNP has more than 6 billion of funds in the DBM procurement service for goods not delivered, based on the annual audit report of 2017. The Bureau of Fire also has funds with them, also with the PITC. So that's why I was worried. A lot of these procurements, when they go to the procurement service of the DBM, they encounter delays.
So
Is
ano yung
that
mga
correct?
departments? PITC?
Marami, sir. Meron pong PNP.
PNP?
Bureau
Ano
of
pa?
Fire.
Bureau of Fire?
And meron pang ibang mga agencies. Pag particular agencies, that's what
Pero
I'm
yung
going to
tatlong
ask.
yan yung PMA. I will ask the DBM, Your Honor, at my back to answer.
Yes, medyo malaki po kasi nasa
Yeah.
6 billion or
I,
something.
definitely, you have my commitment that I will ask the DBM, especially its procurement service, to explain these AOMs of the COA on these particular departments, because they are being penalized not for their problem, not of their own making, but because of possibly, and you know, it will also be a learning experience for DBM, the procurement service, how to further improve their processes and procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Another issue raised by the auditor is the service fee.
Meron ba?
It runs into the hundreds of millions. If an agency goes to the DBM procurement service and doon sila magpapaprocure, meron pong service fee. So for example, yun sa nabasa ko nga sa PNP,
Pero
meron
magkano?
57 million, sa DND meron din.
5%, sir.
Magkano na?
Ang charge namin is
They charge 5%.
So 5% of the total amount of being procured is the service fee of the DBM procurement service. Is
Yes,
that
Your
correct,
Honor.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Pero it's not a trust fund. It goes to the revolving fund ba? So trust fund. Yeah, it's...
Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, the point that the auditor is driving at is these monies for service fees may be used to buy some more items. Like for example, yung Mahindra na sasakyan ng DILG, ng PNP, hundreds of millions yung bayad sa 57 million if I remember it right. So makakabili pa sana yun ng 60 more
So hindi pwede
na
matanggalin.
sasakyan.
Pwede matanggalin? Pwedeng tanggalin, ha?
procurement of agencies yun na we are acting.
Yeah, pero pwede
Daang
matanggalin.
milyon ang bayad.
Tanggalin ang alin, sir.
Yung 5%.
Ay, hindi, sir.
Bakit?
Self-sustaining kami.
Bakit sa sustaining? Wala.
We generate our
5
operating expenses from the service.
So, I share your view, Your Honor. We can do away with it, Your Honor.
Thank
And
you.
probably just give them the funds that they need. Because if essentially, Your Honor, it increases the price of the goods they're being procured. So I'm willing to study with Your Honor that 5% service fee being charged by the PS, because kaya pala hindi ako gumamit ng PS. Kasi tumataas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished
Tumataas
sponsor.
yung presyo dahil...
Especially the DOTR went to the DBMPS procurement service of the DBM for their big ticket procurements.
No, but
Anyway, moving on to my
definitely
next.
I'm willing to look at it and
Thank you,
see
thank
the
you, Mr. Speaker.
economics behind, that 5% service fee.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, because we are moving to a cash-based budgeting system, one of the more important things that will change is the MAYOA, or the Multi-Year Obligation Authority. What is provided for in the General Appropriations Bill under Section 29 is a multi-year contract, or the multi-year contracts, MICA. A shift from a MAYOA to a MICA. May we know the difference, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, for the information of the people and the agencies concerned? Ano po yung magiging epekto doon sa shift from a MAYOA to a MICA? Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor.
Pangalan lang. Pangalan lang.
Pangalan lang. So,
Opo, kasi
pareho-pareho.
yung para lang po the concept will be the same. What it in effect results in will be the same, except that we're no longer obligation. So tinatanggal yung obligation sa MAYOA. So yung MY, imbis ng obligation, it does not exist, becomes C. So the C is cash. So I think, Your Honor, essentially just being consistent with the new regime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Medyo nalito tayo doon. Akala ko merong pagbabago. Pero yung MAYOA ay MICA lang din.
Yung O kasi obligation. Wala nang obligation based, cash based na. So ginawang
Contract.
C yung O.
Hindi na siya obligation, contract na.
Yes, Your Honor, that's right. Pero multi-year pa rin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. My next question is on Section 36. Pasensya na po, pero sa gobyerno, ngayon ko lang kasi narinig to eh.
Ano
Yung sa
yun?
line 20. All national government projects should be subjected to multi-scenario probabilistic analysis. Ano po yun?
Yung luma ba yan? Luma ba itong tinitingnan ko? Hindi. Wala na ho yan ngayon, pero kung ako tatanungin mo, ibabalik ko yan.
Anong bill po
Kaso,
ba to?
ang point dyan,
Excuse
Your
me,
Honor,
ano po ba yung hawak kong bill? Kasi ito po yung page 613, line 20. Yun po yung nakasulat. All national government projects should be subjected to multi-scenario probabilistic analysis.
Hindi, kasi dito sa 2018 wala. Ha? NEP. Ito. Yung NEP, natagal sa NEP. At dinagdagan nyo. Asan ba yan? Parehas lang. Yes, Your Honor. As a DRR practitioner, I
Yes.
will agree with this. Pero kailangan po siguro ng capacity building ng mga agencies para makita nila. Kasi kuminsan po, kung deterministic, may sakang assumption, tapos bahala na kung may contingency kang mapagkukunan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Distinguished sponsor. Ang point ko po kasi is, nire-require natin to sa proposed bill, magiging batas.
Opo.
Meaning to say, i-require natin na bawat programa na yan or project na yan, merong multi-scenario probabilistic analysis. Magkakaroon ng stop lock gate. Paano kung hindi sila marunong gumawa?
Well, definitely, Honor, it's a good guidance to all our agencies that they should always think when they plan that there are risks, and this risk may vary according to context and may vary in terms of, let's say, Honor, if it is a 360 kph with 240 Your Honor, so what type of specification or building would you like to put up? So a multivariate or a probabilistic will say, okay, let's do this 360, 240, what is the cost? Let's do a 150, then 90 per hour, and then what is the cost? And therefore, Your Honor, that allows them to essentially sharpen their budgeting. So alam nila na kung may mangyari, alam nila kung bakit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. Naintindihan ko po yun. Pero in lawmaking kasi, the word used is should. Meaning to say, it becomes mandatory. And is our government agencies prepared to comply with this requirement?
No.
That's my point precisely, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. This proposed bill is requiring a mandatory multi-scenario probabilistic approach for every government project. So it becomes a bureaucratic nightmare. If and when this bill becomes a law, it becomes a requirement. How do government agencies comply with this kind of requirement without the technical know-how of preparing this, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor? I am raising this point because chances are hindi masusunod yung batas. Baka pwedeng i-consider ng ating magiting na sponsor na may yung gamitin na word instead of should because that is mandatory.
In-approve natin kahapon, shall yun eh, sa DDR. Itong pong section na to was essentially lifted virtually from the Department of Disaster Resilience. Kasi po pag dumadaan yung isang project sa kabinete ngayon, walang representante na nagsasabi ito makakapagpataas, makapagbababa ng risk. at kung anong klase mga senaryo na pwede. Ngayon na nandun na yung DDR, unang-una, pwede na nilang tumulungan lahat ng ahensya gumawa nitong sinasabi nating probabilistic modeling ng kanila o scenario building. Mainam pa rin, Your Honor, na mayroong ganang klaseng guidance dito sa ating ginagawang batas. And I think pwede nating gawin na evolving na in the meantime, gawin nating May. Pero I guess, Your Honor, it is good policy to say that you should always have a probabilistic model.
Yes.
Lalo na kung irrigation yan, big ticket, lalo na kung airport yan, lalo na kung mahabang mga toll roads yan, Your Honor, it may require, Your Honor. So for certain areas, Your Honor, I think it may be required. But I agree with you. The word may will, I think at this point, be acceptable, Your Honor, to this sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. The majority leader is looking at me. I have 2 more questions, please.
Wala rin naman pera, CCC.
Section 68, my question is, why was the word program omitted? An item of appropriation shall pertain to the amount appropriated for an activity or project authorized in this act. Are we removing program in the definition of appropriation, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor? Kasi nasanay tayo sa PAPs. Line 20, section 68, page 620, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor.
Ito, sir. Yan yung item. Kasi sir, doon sa, nung in-adapt natin yung program classification, the lowest item lang talaga sa projects and activities. And then in-adapt din natin nung nagde-deliberation ng budget reform bill sa committee level, sinadjust talaga ni Kong Andaya na tanggalin yung program to clarify, sir, na yung lowest item talaga, activities or projects. Yun yung po talaga item.
Pero nandito programs.
Ano siya sa version? Ano yung kinakita kanina natin?
Can I, it's section 68.
Section 68, line 20. An item of appropriation shall pertain to the amount appropriated for an activity or project authorized in this act. We are used to the terms program, activities, and projects, or PAPs. And there is an omission of the word program here. So what does that mean, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor?
Well, philosophically, Your Honor, it essentially limits the ability of agencies. Kasi pag nilagay mo program, di ba, those programs would have the basic unit of authorization will still be a project or an activity, Your Honor. Once you allow augmentation of a program, Your Honor, then you are essentially allowing them
anything.
Mas malaki po ang leeway nila na kuminsan yung activity, ano ba, sa UCT, meron po siyang financial subsidy, meron po siyang bigas, meron po siyang project monitoring. Kaya kuminsan, Your Honor, na mas maganda, it makes good fiscal practice kung yung ino-augment mo ay very specific po na activity or project rather than a program. Because you can say, we are augmenting the conditional cash transfer or the 4Ps. And then which of those activities under 4Ps are you exactly augmenting? So we don't allow anymore the augmentation of programs. Rather, we're limiting potential augmentation only to specific activity and project.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. I agree with that. It should be limited to activities and projects because program is a very broad term. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. My last question pertains to impoundment as opposed to abandonment. Impoundment requires a joint resolution from both houses, whereas abandonment is given to the head of the agency or the president or whoever is allowed to declare an abandonment of program, activity, or project. So my question, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, is how do we distinguish impoundment from abandonment, and why are we putting abandonment in the level of savings, which does not require a joint resolution from both houses?
Ano yan? Wala sa 61 yung abandonment.
Sa savings po yung abandonment, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor.
Savings. Anong section? 61 din? Hindi ka ba nagugutom?
Section 67, kanina pa po ako gutom, sorry. Pero Section 67, Letter A, completion, final discontinuance, or abandonment of a program, activity, or project. Because the scenario that I'm imagining is, I will decide to abandon this program, activity, or project. Then that becomes a savings. It is a form of impoundment, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. That is my point. That is what I'm asking. I may be wrong. That's why I'm asking you, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, because impoundment requires a joint resolution from both houses, whereas abandonment does not. So if I want to force savings, I will just abandon this program, activity, or project and fund something else. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, without the needed joint resolution from both houses of Congress.
So what is your proposal, Your Honor?
I'm just asking, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, kung pwede po munang tama po ba yung view ko or may mali ako dahil bata pa ako dito sa Kongreso?
Bata kayo, pero kailangan sagutin.
Sir, kasi dapat it's without the fault of the agency that it's abandoned. Ibig sabihin, it's due to uncontrollable circumstances that they abandon it. So ito yung
Therefore,
sir, pwede
andito ba yan?
abandonment. Yes, it's there. So ito yung qualify ng
Well, anyway, Your Honor, it's not naman na it is a blank check just to create savings. Then you, unlike impoundment na may joint resolution, ito po, Your Honor, I think we can improve this because actually may guiding po siya condition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Na hindi dapat fault ng agency concern. Kung
Saka
bakit
merong may limitation yan. Within 2 years, hindi mo pwedeng programahan yung inabandon mo.
Yes, Your Honor, we will definitely welcome any amendment to this effect, Your Honor,
Yes,
in
Mr.
order to
Speaker,
control
later on,
potential
maybe we can-
excesses on the part of the executive.
Thank
That
you,
is
Mr.
our
Speaker.
job.
Distinguished sponsor, my apologies. Tayo ay nagutom. Maraming salamat po. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Honorable Mending. Majority Floor Leader. Hindi ka pa rin ba gutom? Yeah, Majority Floor Leader. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we suspend the interpellation for an hour in order for the sponsor and the others to have lunch.
There is a motion to suspend and to resume after 1 hour. Is there any objection? There being none, motion is carried. Kakain na.